I walked home clutching a cheap birthday cake, only to find my key refused to turn. Through the window, my father laughed, celebrating my erasure. He spoke through the crack, telling me I was no longer family. Before the shock could settle, a long black car sliced through the darkness. The door opened, and a woman who had been dead for 10 years stepped out, looked me in the eye, and whispered that it was time to take everything back. My name is Audrey Taylor, and for the last 10 years, I have replayed this specific Tuesday night in my head more times than I have blinked. It was November in Cedar Hollow, Pennsylvania. If you have never been to Cedar Hollow, imagine a place where the winter gray settles into the bones of the town somewhere around mid-October and refuses to leave until May. It is a town of rust and siding, where dreams usually go to die quietly on a porch swing. I was turning 18 years old that night. In most stories, 18 is the golden hour, the moment the world opens its arms and offers you the keys to the kingdom. In my story, the world did not offer me keys. In fact, it took the only ones I had away. I had just finished a double shift at the diner on the edge of town. My feet were throbbing in my non-slip shoes, a dull, rhythmic ache that traveled all the way up my shins. I smelled like fryer grease and stale coffee, a perfume I had worn since I was 16 and started picking up every shift Calvin would allow me to take. I was clutching a small white cardboard box in my right hand. Inside was a vanilla sponge cake from the grocery store bakery, the kind with the neon blue frosting that stains your teeth for days. It had a 50% discount sticker on the lid because the sell-by date was today. I had bought it for myself. There was no party waiting for me. I knew that. My father, Calvin Whitmore, and his wife, Marla, did not do parties for me. Parties were for Evan, my half-brother, who was 3 years younger and shone like a golden calf in their eyes. For me, birthdays were just days where I was reminded that I was another year older and still a burden, but I thought, perhaps, there might be a card, or maybe just silence, which would have been a gift in itself. I walked up the cracked concrete path to the house. It was a 2-story colonial that had seen better days, the paint peeling in long, sunburnt strips. It had been my mother's house. She bought it before she met Calvin, before the accident, before the silence that swallowed my childhood. Now, it was his kingdom. I shifted the cake box to my left hand and fished my keys out of my apron pocket. The metal was cold against my fingers. I slid the key into the deadbolt, just like I had done 1,000 times before. It did not turn. I frowned, jiggling it slightly. Sometimes the tumbler stuck when the temperature dropped below freezing. I pulled it out, blew into the keyhole, and tried again. I pushed harder this time, twisting with a force that made my wrist ache. Nothing. It hit a hard, unyielding stop. It was the wrong key. No, that was impossible. I looked down at the brass key in my hand. It was the same key I had used this morning when I left for school. Before heading straight to the diner, I looked at the door. The wood around the lock looked fresh. There were tiny shavings of sawdust on the welcome mat, pale yellow against the brown fiber. My stomach dropped, a sensation like missing a step on a steep staircase. I stepped back and looked at the living room window. The curtains were drawn, but there was a gap, a slice of yellow light cutting through the darkness. I moved toward it, my boots crunching softly on the dead leaves. I peered inside. The fireplace was roaring. The room was bathed in a warm, amber glow that looked nothing like the cold gray reality I was standing in. They were there. Calvin was sitting in his leather armchair, a glass of scotch resting on his knee. Marla was laughing, her head thrown back, holding a crystal flute of something sparkling. And Evan was sitting on the floor, tearing open a gift wrapped in shiny silver paper. It wasn't even his birthday. They looked like a picture in a catalog. They looked like a family that had been made whole by the subtraction of one awkward, unwanted variable. Me. I felt a knock in my chest, a physical blow of panic. I ran back to the door and pounded on it with my fist. "Dad," I called out. My voice sounded thin in the wind. "Dad, the key isn't working." The laughter inside stopped abruptly. I saw the shadows move. A moment later, The porch light flickered on, blinding me for a second. The door opened, but only as far as the security chain would allow. A sliver of Calvin's face appeared in the gap. He looked at me, not with anger, but with a terrifying, blank indifference. It was the look you give a stranger soliciting donations at dinner time. "Dad," I breathed, relief washing over me prematurely. "The lock. It's jammed or something. I can't get in." Calvin took a sip of his drink. The ice clinked against the glass, a sharp, crisp sound. "The lock isn't jammed, Audrey," he said. His voice was steady, calm. "It's changed." I stared at him, the cake box trembling in my hand. "What? You are 18 years old today," Calvin said. He spoke the words slowly, as if explaining a simple math problem to a slow child. "My legal obligation to provide you with housing, food, and care ended at midnight. You are an adult. You are on your own." I laughed. It was a nervous, jagged sound. "Dad, stop it. It's freezing out here. Let me in." "This isn't a joke," he said. He didn't blink. "You're not a Whitmore. You never were, really. You were just something I had to tolerate because the state required it. Well, the state doesn't require it anymore." Behind him, Marla appeared. She was wearing a cashmere sweater that looked soft enough to sleep in. She peered over Calvin's shoulder, her lips curled in a tight, satisfied smirk. "We packed your things," Marla said. Her voice was high and sweet, laced with venom. "We didn't want you to have to worry about packing." "My things," I whispered. "They are on the side of the house," Calvin said. "By the curb?" "In the black bags," Marla added helpfully. "The heavy-duty ones. It's trash night tomorrow, so make sure you grab them before the truck comes in the morning. Otherwise, they might get confused." My breath hitched. "You put my life in trash bags." "We put your property in bags," Calvin corrected. "Whatever you bought with your own money, or whatever your mother left you that wasn't legally mine, which wasn't much, everything else stays." "But where am I supposed to go?" I asked, my voice cracking. "I have school tomorrow. I have nowhere to go." "That sounds like an adult problem," Calvin said. He started to close the door. "Happy birthday, Audrey." "Wait." I jammed my foot in the door before he could shut it. The heavy wood crushed my sneaker, pinching my toes. But I didn't care. "You can't do this. This is Mom's house. She wouldn't—" "Your mother," Calvin snarled, his calm facade cracking for just a fraction of a second to reveal the hate underneath, "is dead, and she has been dead for a long time. This is my house, and I'm celebrating the fact that I finally have my home back." Suddenly, a phone camera was shoved into the gap, right in my face. The flash blinded me. "Say cheese, sis," Evan's voice cracked with adolescent glee. He was filming me. He was filming his sister being thrown out into the cold on her 18th birthday. "This is going on the story. Homeless edition. You look tragic. Audrey, seriously, cry a little more. It's good for engagement." I swatted at the phone, but Evan pulled it back, laughing. "Enough," Calvin said. He kicked my foot away from the jam. "Get off my property. Audrey, if you're still here in 10 minutes, I'm calling the sheriff for trespassing. And you know Sheriff Miller plays poker with me on Thursdays." The door slammed shut. The sound echoed in the hollow of my chest. Then, the deadbolt slid home with a final, metallic thud. I stood there for a long time. The porch light flickered once, then turned off, plunging me back into the darkness. I walked slowly down the steps. My legs felt like they were filled with lead. I went around to the side of the house, near the curb where the garbage cans stood. There they were, 3 black plastic trash bags, knotted carelessly at the top. One of them had a tear in the side, and the sleeve of my favorite flannel shirt was poking out, dragging in the mud. I dropped the cake. I didn't mean to, but my fingers just lost their strength. The box hit the pavement and burst open. The vanilla sponge collapsed, the blue frosting smearing against the dirty asphalt. It looked like a bruised eye staring up at me. I sank down onto the curb, right next to the trash bags that contained everything I owned in the world. I pulled my knees to my chest and wrapped my arms around them, trying to preserve whatever body heat I had left. The wind was picking up, cutting through my thin waitress uniform. I pulled out my phone. 4% battery. It was an old model. The screen cracked in the corner. I had no one to call. My friends from high school were all at the movies or studying, and what would I say? Hey. My dad threw me away like a bag of yard trimmings. I stared at the house. The laughter had started up again inside. They were happy. That was the thing that broke me, not the cold. Not the eviction, but the happiness. They were relieved I was gone. For 10 years, ever since my mother's car went off that bridge, I had felt like a ghost haunting my own life. I walked on eggshells. I made myself small. I apologized for taking up space, and it wasn't enough. A dark thought, one I had pushed down for years, bubbled up in my throat. Did she really just lose control of the car? Calvin had told the police it was a rainy night. He said she was tired. He said it was a tragic accident. But I remembered that night. I was 8. I remembered she wasn't tired. She was scared. She had been packing a bag not for a trip, but for an escape. She had whispered to me that we were going to go see Grandma, and then she drove away to get gas. And she never came back. Calvin said Grandma was dead, too. He said my mother's family wanted nothing to do with us. He said we were alone. I shivered, the cold seeping into my marrow. I looked at the ruined cake. Happy birthday, Audrey, I whispered to the empty street. I was about to close my eyes, to just let the cold take me for a while, when the darkness was shattered by 2 beams of blinding white light. A vehicle was moving slowly down the street, in Cedar Hollow. The cars were usually rusted pickups or sedans that sounded like lawnmowers. This was neither. It was silent. Prowling like a panther, the headlights swept across the lawns, illuminating the frost on the grass, until they landed on me. The car stopped directly in front of the house. It was long, black, and impossibly clean. A Lincoln Town Car, or maybe something even more expensive. It looked like an ink stain against the night. I squinted, shielding my eyes. The engine purred, a low rumble that vibrated in the pavement beneath me. The rear door opened. A woman stepped out. She was tall, wearing a long trench coat that looked like it was cut from midnight itself. Her hair was silver, not gray as striking. Metallic silver that caught the light from the street lamp. It was pulled back in a sharp, elegant twist. She didn't look like anyone from this town. She looked like she had walked out of a black and white movie, crisp and terrifyingly high definition. She didn't look at the house. She didn't look at the trash bags. She looked straight at me. Her heels clicked on the pavement, a sharp, authoritative rhythm. Click, click, click. She stopped 3 feet away from where I sat on the curb. I looked up at her, feeling small and dirty and pathetic. I wiped my nose with the back of my hand, smearing grease and tears across my cheek. The woman looked down at me. Her eyes were sharp, intelligent, and fiercely blue, the same blue I saw in the mirror every morning. She looked at the cake on the ground. Then she looked at the locked door of the house. A muscle in her jaw jumped. Once, when she spoke, her voice was low, raspy, and carried an accent of old money and steel. "Audrey Taylor," she said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. It was a summons. I blinked, my voice trembling. Who are you?" She extended a hand. She was wearing black leather gloves. "Get up," she commanded, not unkindly, but with an urgency that made my spine straighten. "We have work to do." "I don't know you," I stammered, though my heart was hammering a rhythm that suggested otherwise. "My father, he said everyone was dead." The woman's lips pressed into a thin line. She looked up at the window where Calvin was sitting, oblivious to the storm that had just parked on his lawn. "Your father," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper that felt louder than a scream, "has spent 10 years building a castle on a foundation of lies. I am Vivian Drake, and I am here to evict him." She reached down, grabbed my hand, and pulled me to my feet. The grip was strong. It felt like an anchor. "Happy birthday, granddaughter," she said. "Now, dry your face. It is time to take it all back." Vivian Drake did not hug me. She did not weep. She did not offer me a handkerchief to wipe the frosting and grime from my face. Instead, she took off her leather glove, revealing a hand that was wrinkled but manicured to perfection, and touched my chin. Her fingers were warm. She tilted my face up, inspecting the damage like a general surveying a battlefield that had been lost due to incompetence. Then, she turned her gaze to the black plastic bag sitting wet and pathetic on the curb. Her eyes hardened. It was a terrifying transformation. If her look at me had been assessing, her look at the house was incinerating. A second car pulled up behind the Lincoln. This one was a large gray SUV with tinted windows. The doors opened in perfect synchronization. 4 men in dark suits stepped out. They did not look like family friends. They looked like sharks in human clothing. One of them, a man with a briefcase handcuffed to his wrist, walked straight to Vivian. "Ms. Drake," he said. His voice was clipped, professional. "The local authorities have been notified. Dispatch says Sheriff Miller is 3 minutes out." "Good," Vivian said. Her voice was like cracking ice. "Have the locksmith stand by?" I stood there, shivering, my brain struggling to catch up with the reality unfolding on the sidewalk. "Sheriff Miller," I whispered. "He's Calvin's friend. They play poker on Thursdays. He won't help me." Vivian looked at me, and for a split second, there was a flicker of something soft in her eyes, something that looked almost like pity, but she killed it instantly. "Sheriff Miller is a public servant, Audrey, and tonight, he is going to learn the difference between local influence and federal power." The sound of a siren cut through the night air. A cruiser skidded around the corner, lights flashing red and blue, painting the quiet suburban street in a chaotic strobe. The car screeched to a halt behind the SUV. Sheriff Miller hauled himself out. He was a big man, heavy around the middle, with a face that was permanently flushed. He adjusted his belt, looking from the luxury cars to the trash bags, and finally to me. "All right, what is going on here?" Miller barked, his hand resting instinctively near his holster. He looked at the men in suits, then settled his gaze on Vivian. "You folks are blocking a residential street. I need to see some identification, or I'm going to have to ask you to move along." "We are not moving," the man with the briefcase said. He stepped forward. "I am Arthur Sterling, representing the Drake estate. We are here to execute a writ of possession regarding the property at 42 Oak Creek Lane." Miller blinked. "A writ of what?" "This is Calvin Whitmore's house. I was just having a beer with him last week." "It is not Calvin Whitmore's house," Sterling said calmly. He unlocked the briefcase on the hood of the SUV. The click of the latches sounded like gunshots in the quiet night. He pulled out a thick document bound in blue paper, stamped with a gold seal that caught the reflection of the streetlights. "This residence is the sole property of the Mara Drake Trust, administered by the Drake Meridian Group. Mr. Whitmore was merely a tenant under a conditional guardianship clause." The front door of the house flew open. Calvin stomped out onto the porch, Marla right on his heels. Evan followed, his phone still raised, the recording light a steady red eye in the darkness. "Miller," Calvin shouted, his voice booming. "Get these people off my driveway. I told Audrey to leave, and now she's brought a circus." Calvin marched down the steps, his face twisted in anger. He stopped abruptly when he reached the bottom step. The security lights from the garage flooded the driveway, illuminating Vivian where she stood next to me. Calvin froze. The color drained from his face so fast, it looked like a physical reaction, like gravity pulling the blood into his shoes. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked like a man who had walked into his own funeral. "Hello, Calvin," Vivian said. She didn't shout. She didn't have to. "No," Calvin whispered. He took a stumbling step back, nearly tripping over Marla. "No, that's not your dead. You died in Switzerland. The avalanche. We got the report." "A report you were very quick to accept," Vivian said. She took a step forward, her heels clicking on the concrete. "You were so eager to declare me dead that you didn't bother to ask for the body. You just wanted the trust fund to unlock. Didn't you?" "I have a death certificate," Calvin stammered. He looked at Miller, desperate for validation. I have a death certificate. Miller, she's a fraud. This is an imposter. The death certificate, Vivian said, her voice dripping with disdain, was based on a presumption of death filed by you. Calvin, you told the courts I had vanished. You told them there was no hope. You were quite convincing. She paused, her eyes narrowing. But it is very hard to be dead when one is simply recovering in a private clinic, waiting for the vultures to show their true colors. Marla grabbed Calvin's arm. Call the police. Calvin, make them leave. I am the police. Marla, Miller said, looking confused and terrified. He looked at the document Sterling was holding out to him. Calvin, this looks real. It's got a judge's signature. Judge Hallowell from the Superior Court. It is a forgery, Calvin screamed. She is dead. My wife is dead. Her mother is dead. They are all dead. Sterling ignored the outburst. He handed the document to Miller. Sheriff, if you look at page 4, paragraph 2, the occupancy of this property by Mr. Calvin Whitmore was granted solely on the condition that he serve as the primary guardian and provider for the beneficiary, Miss Audrey Taylor. Evan, realizing the drama was shifting, moved closer, shoving his phone toward Vivian. World star, he muttered, giggling nervously. This is going viral. Crazy old lady attacks Dad. One of the security guards stepped in front of Evan. He didn't touch the boy. He just stood there, a wall of muscle and silence. Evan lowered the phone, his bravado evaporating. Sterling continued, his voice monotone and lethal. At 1800 hours this evening, Mr. Whitmore illegally evicted the beneficiary. We have a witness statement, Miss Taylor, and visual evidence of her belongings on the curb. I can kick her out, Calvin yelled. She is 18. The support agreement ends at 18. Incorrect, Sterling said. He flipped a page. The support agreement ends when the beneficiary turns 21, or upon the completion of her education. However, that is a minor point. The major point is Clause 7, the abuse of power. Sterling looked up from the paper, staring directly at Calvin. The trust stipulates that if the guardian acts with malice, negligence, or attempts to defraud the beneficiary of her residency, the guardian's right to occupy the premises is immediately revoked. Immediately. You can't do this, Marla screeched. She looked less like a catalog model now and more like a cornered animal. We live here. Our things are in there. You have 30 minutes to collect personal essentials, Sterling said, checking his watch. After that, the locks will be changed. Anything left inside will be cataloged by our team and placed in storage at your expense. Miller, do something. Calvin grabbed the sheriff's shoulder. Miller shook him off. The sheriff had been reading the document. He wasn't a lawyer, but he knew what a federal seal looked like, and he knew what contempt of court meant. He looked at his poker buddy with a mix of disgust and self-preservation. Calvin, Miller said, stepping back. You need to step aside. This is a court order. If you interfere, I have to arrest you. Arrest me, Calvin's voice cracked. For what? It is my house? Actually, Vivian interrupted. She walked past the sheriff, past the lawyer, and stood toe-to-toe with Calvin. She was shorter than him, but in that moment, she towered over the entire street. It is not, it never was. You were a guest. Calvin, a guest who overstayed his welcome by 10 years. She reached into her coat pocket. Calvin flinched, as if he expected a weapon. Vivian pulled out a folded piece of paper. It wasn't a legal document. It was a photocopy of a check. Do you know what this is? She asked softly. Calvin squinted at it in the dim light. His eyes widened. It is the withdrawal slip from the education fund, Vivian said. Dated 3 days ago, for $50,000, signed by Audrey Taylor, I gasped. I never signed that. I didn't even know I had an education fund. I know you didn't, Vivian said to me, without looking away from Calvin, because the signature on this check does not match the signature on your driver's license, but it does match the handwriting on your mother's old medical forms. The ones you filled out? Calvin, the silence that followed was absolute. Even the wind seemed to stop. Fraud. That was the word hanging in the air. Not just eviction. Prison. Calvin looked at the check, then at Vivian, then at the police cruiser. The fight went out of him. He slumped, suddenly looking 10 years older. "I needed the liquidity," he mumbled. "It was an investment. I was going to put it back." "Grand larceny," Sterling noted to the sheriff. "We will be filing those charges in the morning, but for tonight, we just want the house." Vivian turned to the security team. "Escort Mr. Whitmore and his guests inside to collect their medication and a change of clothes. Watch them. If they touch anything valuable, a vase, a painting, a piece of silverware, you stop them." Marla let out a sob and ran toward the door. Evan stood frozen, his phone dangling at his side. "Go," Vivian said to Evan. "Pack your bag, boy. You wanted a viral moment. You are living in it." Evan scrambled after his mother. Calvin stood there for one last second, staring at me. There was no apology in his eyes, only a deep, festering hatred. "You think you have won," he hissed. "You are just a little girl. You don't know what you are starting." "She is not starting anything," Vivian said. "She is finishing it." She nodded to the security guard, who gently took Calvin by the elbow and guided him up the stairs of the porch he had forbidden me from entering 10 minutes ago. I watched them go. I watched the door open. I watched the warm light from inside spill out onto the cold lawn. I felt lightheaded. My knees buckled, and I sat back down on the curb, right next to my trash bags. Vivian sat down next to me. She didn't care about her coat. She didn't care about the dirt. She sat on the cold concrete of Cedar Hollow and put her arm around my shoulders. "Why?" I asked, my voice trembling uncontrollably. "Why did you wait 10 years? Where were you?" "I will explain everything," she promised. "But not here, not on the sidewalk." A van pulled up. It was white, unmarked. A man in blue coveralls hopped out holding a heavy metal toolbox. He looked at the scene, the luxury cars, the crying woman in the doorway, the police officer reading a lawsuit, and shrugged. "Someone called for a locksmith," he asked. Vivian stood up. She pulled me up with her. She pointed to the front door, where Calvin was being marched out with a hastily packed duffel bag. "The locks," Vivian said to the tradesman. Her voice was final. "Change them. And this time, change them back to the way they were before the rats moved in." The leather seat of the Lincoln Town car was warmer than any bed I had slept in for the last decade. It hummed with a subtle, heated vibration that seeped into my frozen lower back, trying to coax the tension out of my muscles. I did not let it. I sat rigid, my hands clenching the fabric of my grease-stained apron, staring out the tinted window as Cedar Hollow blurred into a streak of gray and black. We were moving fast. The town where I had spent 18 years being invisible was disappearing in the rearview mirror, and with it, the version of myself that believed I deserved the cold. Next to me, Vivian Drake was on her phone. She was not shouting. She was speaking in a low, rapid-fire French that sounded like a series of soft explosions. I did not understand the words, but I understood the tone. It was the tone of a commander moving troops into position. She hung up and placed the phone face down on the center console. "You have questions," she said. She did not look at me. She was watching the highway, her profile sharp against the passing streetlights. "I think I am hallucinating," I said, my voice sounding raspy in the quiet cabin. "An hour ago, I was eating stale cake on a curb. Now I am in a car that costs more than my father's life insurance policy, sitting next to a grandmother who has been dead since I was 8. Dead is a very useful status to have. Audrey," Vivian said. She turned to me then. "It makes people careless. It makes them talk. It makes them sign things they shouldn't." "Why?" I asked. The word felt heavy. "If you were alive, why did you leave me there with him?" Vivian flinched. It was a small movement, a tightening of the skin around her eyes, but I saw it. Because 10 years ago, I had a target on my back, and if I had come for you, I would have put that target on you too. She reached across the seat and placed her hand over mine. Her skin was dry and cool. "I will tell you everything. But first, we need to go to the office. The battlefield is not in Cedar Hollow. It is in Philadelphia." The drive took an hour. We crossed the city limits as the clock ticked past midnight. Philadelphia rose up around us, a canyon of glass and steel. The car pulled into the underground garage of a skyscraper that pierced the night sky like a needle. The sign above the entrance read, "Drake Meridian Plaza." We took a private elevator to the 45th floor. My stomach lurched as we ascended, my ears popping. When the doors opened, I stepped out into a lobby that smelled of lemons and beeswax. The floors were marble, polished to a mirror shine. Vivian walked fast. For a woman of her age, she moved with a terrifying vitality. We passed empty cubicles and darkened conference rooms until we reached a set of double oak doors at the end of the hall. Inside, the office was vast. One wall was entirely glass, offering a panoramic view of the city lights bleeding into the dark horizon. In the center of the room sat a desk the size of a dining table. "Sit," Vivian said, pointing to a chair. I sat. I felt absurd in my waitress uniform, my sneakers squeaking on the expensive rug. Vivian walked to a large painting on the wall, an abstract storm of blues and grays. She pressed a hidden panel on the frame, and the painting swung outward, revealing a steel safe. She spun the dial with practiced ease. Right, left, right. The heavy door swung open. She pulled out a thick red file folder and dropped it onto the desk in front of me. The sound it made was a dull, heavy thud. "This," she said, "is the Mara Drake Legacy Fund." I touched the cover. "My mother's name. Your mother was a brilliant woman, Audrey, but she had a weakness for broken things. She thought she could fix Calvin. She didn't realize that some things aren't broken. They are just rotten." Vivian walked around the desk and sat opposite me. "When she died, this fund was supposed to lock. It was designed to trigger on your 18th birthday. Today." "Okay," I said, trying to process the information. "So, is this money for college?" Vivian let out a short, mirthless laugh. "It is not just money for college, child. It is a controlling interest in Drake Meridian's logistics division. It is real estate holdings. It is a portfolio worth roughly $40 million. The number hit me like a physical blow. $40 million, I repeated. "But Dad said we were broke. He said we could barely afford the mortgage. He made me pay rent out of my tips starting when I was 16. "Calvin says many things," Vivian said. "Open the file." I opened it. The first page was a summary of assets. I skipped it, the numbers blurring before my eyes. I turned the page. It was a transfer authorization form. Subject transfer of guardianship assets. Liquidity access. Date, November 14th, 2 years ago. Amount $5 million. Reason emergency medical expenses. Educational trust maintenance. My eyes scanned down to the bottom of the page. There was a line for the beneficiary's signature, my signature, and next to it, the guardian's signature. "I never signed this," I said, pointing to the blank space where my name should have been. "Look closer," Vivian commanded. I looked at the guardian line. It was signed in a jagged, aggressive scrawl, Calvin Whitmore, acting as sole guardian and proxy. "He withdrew $5 million, I asked, my voice rising. "For what I didn't have medical expenses, I haven't been to a doctor since the school nurse checked me for lice in 3rd grade. "Turn the page," Vivian said. Her voice was grim. I turned it. Another withdrawal. $3 million, then another, $2 million. Then, a document titled Collateral Assignment. "This is the smoking gun," Vivian explained, leaning forward. "This document pledges the remainder of the fund, the entire principal as security for a series of private loans." "Loans for what?" "A venture capital scheme." Vivian said, "Calvin fancies himself an investor. He put your money into a high-risk development project in the Cayman Islands, a resort that does not exist. The developers took the money and vanished 6 months ago. The loans are in default." I stared at the paper. The legal jargon swam in front of me. but the reality was crystal clear. He lost it, I whispered. He lost everything. Not everything, Vivian corrected. The bank hasn't foreclosed yet. They were waiting for the collateral to mature, which happens today, on your birthday, when the title officially transfers to you. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city. You see, Audrey, I have been watching Calvin for a long time. I knew he was greedy, but I thought he was just a petty thief. I did not realize he was stupid enough to gamble with money he didn't own. She turned back to me. The city lights framed her silhouette, making her look like a vengeful angel. Why did he kick me out tonight? I asked, the question that had been gnawing at me since I saw the new lock. If he needed this money, why antagonize me? Why not play the loving father for one more day so I would sign whatever he needed? Because he knows he can't get you to sign, Vivian said. He knows the moment you walk into a bank or a lawyer's office as an adult, the audit trail begins. He knows that as long as you are in the house, you are a liability, you are a reminder. She walked back to the desk and tapped the file with her index finger. He didn't kick you out because he hates you. Audrey, he hates you. Certainly, you look too much like the woman he destroyed. But that is not why he changed the locks. He changed the locks because he is terrified of you. I sat back in the chair. The leather creaked. Terrified of me. He needed you gone, she continued. He needed you desperate, homeless, and broken. A homeless girl doesn't hire a forensic accountant. A homeless girl doesn't ask about trust funds. He was banking on you disappearing into the poverty he prepared for you. He wanted you to be too busy surviving to ever realize you were a queen he had robbed. A cold fury began to rise in my chest. It started in my stomach and spread to my fingertips. It wasn't the sad, heavy feeling of the porch. It was hot. It was sharp. He made me pay rent, I said, my voice shaking. He made me beg for lunch money. He let Evan mock me for wearing thrift store clothes, and he was sitting on $40 million of my mother's money. Yes, Vivian said softly. He stole my life, I said. He didn't just steal the money. He stole the last 10 years. He made me think I was worthless, so he could be rich. And now, Vivian said, he is going to pay for it, not just with money, but with his name, his freedom, his future. She reached into the file and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a timeline. My team has been tracking the transactions. We have enough for a lawsuit, but a lawsuit takes years. Calvin is slippery. He will blame bad advice. He will blame the market. He might even try to blame your mother's mismanagement before she died. So what do? I asked. We don't just sue him. Vivian said. We destroy his narrative. We prove that the accident 10 years ago wasn't just a tragedy. It was the first step in a long con. Suddenly, the heavy oak doors opened. A young man in a crisp suit walked in. He looked tired but alert. He was holding a tablet. This was Nolan Pierce. I didn't know his name yet, but I would come to trust him with my life. Ms. Drake, he said. We have a problem. Vivian turned. What is it? Nolan? I set up the tripwires on the digital archives like you asked, Nolan said, walking over to the desk. He placed the tablet down, spinning it so we could see the screen. 10 minutes ago, we got a ping. From where? Vivian asked. Internal access, Nolan said. Someone is logged into the St. Bridget Medical Center database. They are using an administrative override code. What are they looking at? I asked, leaning in. Nolan tapped the screen. A red progress bar was moving across the bottom. They aren't just looking, Nolan said grimly. They are purging. They are deleting the raw data files from the trauma unit, specifically the admission logs and the coroner's preliminary notes from the night of November 12th, 10 years ago. My breath caught in my throat. November 12th, the night my mother died. Who is doing it? Vivian demanded. The IP address is masked, Nolan said. But the user credentials, they belong to a Dr. Eris Thorne, the chief of surgery. Thorne, Vivian hissed. Calvin's golf partner. They are trying to erase the medical evidence, I realized. Why if she died in a car crash? What is there to hide? Exactly, Vivian said, her eyes locked onto mine. If it was just a car crash, the autopsy would show blunt force trauma consistent with a steering wheel impact. But if they are deleting the files now, 10 years later, right after I showed up. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. They are scared, I said. They are panicking, Vivian corrected. She grabbed her coat from the chair. Nolan, can you stop the deletion? I can slow it down, Nolan said, his fingers flying across the tablet. But I can't stop it remotely, not without triggering a system lockdown that would alert them to our presence. Then we go to the source, Vivian said. She looked at me. Are you tired? Audrey? I looked at the clock on the wall. It was 2 a.m. I had been awake for 20 hours. I was exhausted. But the anger in my blood was better than caffeine. No, I said, standing up. I'm not tired. Good, Vivian said, walking toward the door. Because we are going to the hospital, and we are going to get those files before they disappear forever. St. Bridget Medical Center rose out of the darkness of Philadelphia like a fortress of glass and concrete. It was 3 a.m. when Nolan Pierce pulled the car up to the emergency bay entrance. The automatic doors hissed open, exhaling a breath of air that smelled of antiseptic, floor wax, and the specific, metallic scent of crisis. Vivian had stayed in the car. She told us that her face was a ghost story that the world was not quite ready to read yet, and she needed to coordinate the security team for whatever came next. So, it was just me and Nolan. Nolan walked with a stride that suggested he owned the linoleum beneath his feet. He was carrying a slim leather portfolio and the tablet that had flagged the data breach. I walked beside him, feeling like an imposter in my own life. My waitress uniform was covered by a long wool coat Vivian had pulled from the trunk of her car. Something expensive and warm that smelled like lavender, but underneath, I still felt like the girl who had been kicked off her porch hours ago. Keep your head up, Nolan murmured without looking at me. You are not a victim here, Audrey. You are the client. You have the power. We bypassed the emergency desk and went straight to the elevators, heading for the basement level where the records and archives department lived. The hallway was quiet, the fluorescent lights humming with a low, insect-like buzz. The archives office was behind a heavy security door with a wired glass window. Inside, a woman was sitting behind a counter, surrounded by stacks of manila folders. She looked to be in her late 50s, with tired eyes and a cardigan pulled tight around her shoulders. She looked up as we entered, her expression shifting from boredom to mild annoyance at the interruption. "We are closed for public inquiries," she said, pointing to a sign on the wall. "Come back at 9. "This is not a public inquiry," Nolan said, placing his card on the counter. "I am Nolan Pierce, legal counsel for the Drake Meridian Group. We are here regarding a data integrity breach concerning a patient file. We believe there is an active attempt to tamper with evidence." The woman adjusted her glasses and looked at the card, then at Nolan. "We have protocols. Mr. Pierce, I can't just—" Then she looked at me. Her words died in her throat. She stood up slowly, her chair scraping against the floor. She stared at my face, her eyes widening behind the thick lenses. "Mara," she whispered. The name hung in the air, suspended in the sterile silence. "No," I said, my voice tight. "I am her daughter, Audrey." The woman let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for a decade. She walked around the counter, coming closer to the glass partition. "My God, you have her eyes. The exact same shape. I remember her. She was so kind, even when she was hurting." "You remember her?" I asked, stepping forward. "From 10 years ago. I processed her admission," the woman said softly. "And I processed her release to the morgue. You don't forget a case like that, not when the patient is so young, and so sad." "We need her file," Nolan said gently. "The physical file, not the digital one. Someone is trying to wipe the server, but they can't wipe paper. The woman hesitated, looking at the security camera in the corner of the room. I shouldn't. The administrator. The administrator is likely the one trying to delete the history. Nolan said, Please, help us save the truth. She looked at me one last time, then nodded. She turned and disappeared into the rows of metal shelving. We stood in silence for what felt like an hour, though it was probably only 5 minutes. When she returned, she wasn't holding a file. She was empty-handed. I can't give it to you, she said, her voice shaking. Why not? Nolan demanded. It is sealed, she said. Physically sealed. It has a red tag. It means there is a court order attached to the physical jacket. I cannot open it without a judge's signature or the biometric override of the chief of surgery. Who requested the seal? Nolan asked, though I already knew the answer. The woman typed something into her terminal. The order was filed November 15th, 10 years ago, requesting party Calvin Whitmore, reason cited protection of minor child and family privacy. He sealed it to protect me. I let out a dry, bitter laugh. He sealed it to hide what he did. Nolan leaned over the counter. Can you see the access log? Who authorized the medical decisions that night? The woman tapped the keys. It says here medical power of attorney was granted to Calvin Whitmore, signed November 12th. That is the day she died, I said. What time was it signed? Nolan asked sharply. 2 in the afternoon. The woman read. Nolan looked at me. Audrey, think back. 2 in the afternoon on that day. Where was your mother? I closed my eyes, forcing my mind back to the day that broke my world. She was in bed, I said. She had been in bed for 2 days. She said she had the flu, but she wouldn't let me come into the room. She spoke to me through the door. Her voice was slurred. She was incapacitated, Nolan said, his voice cold. If she was sedated or unconscious, she couldn't have legally signed a power of attorney document. That signature is a forgery, or it was coerced. I can't give you the file, the woman repeated, looking nervous now. If I break the seal, the system alerts Dr. Thorne. He will know. Dr. Thorne is already deleting the backups, Nolan said. We are running out of time. Just then, a side door opened. A nurse walked in. She was older than the archivist, wearing scrubs that looked like they had been washed 1,000 times. She was carrying a tray of coffees. She stopped when she saw us. She looked at me, and unlike the archivist, she didn't look surprised. She looked resigned. I wondered if you would ever come, the nurse said. Her voice was like gravel. Betty, the archivist warned. Don't. The nurse, Betty, set the tray down on a desk. She walked over to us. I was the charge nurse in the trauma unit that night, she said. I was there when the ambulance brought her in. I was there when Dr. Thorne told us to leave the room so he could handle the sensitive examination personally. What happened? I asked. Betty reached into the deep pocket of her scrubs. She pulled out a folded, yellowing piece of paper. It wasn't an official document. It was a photocopy of a chart note, grainy and faded. I knew something was wrong, Betty said. The way Calvin Whitmore was acting, he wasn't crying, he was managing, he was directing traffic. So before Thorne locked the file, I made a copy of the intake assessment, just 1 page. She slid the paper across the counter. I looked down. The medical handwriting was difficult to read, but Nolan deciphered it instantly. Patient presence with multiple contusions, lacerations, and internal hemorrhaging. Nolan read aloud. Wait. He stopped. He pointed to a line halfway down the page. Mechanism of injury. I leaned in. The words were stark, inconsistent with high-velocity vehicular impact. Pattern of bruising on upper arms and torso suggests defensive posturing. Linear contusions on back suggest striking with a blunt object prior to vehicle entry. The room seemed to spin. Blunt object, I whispered. Prior to vehicle entry. She wasn't just in a car crash, Nolan said, looking up at me with horror in his eyes. She was beaten. Before she ever got in the car. The memory hit me then, violent and sudden. I was 8 years old. It was summer, months before the accident. It was 90 degrees outside, humid and sticky. My mother was wearing a long-sleeved turtleneck. I had asked her why she was wearing winter clothes. She had smiled, a tight, painful smile, and told me she was just feeling a chill. I remembered the sound of the front door opening, the heavy thud of Calvin's footsteps. I remembered how she would freeze, like a rabbit sensing a wolf. She would stop breathing for a second, her eyes darting to the hallway, defensive posturing. "He beat her," I said. My voice sounded far away. "He didn't just kill her by tampering with the car. He was hurting her for years. And that night he went too far. Maybe he didn't mean to kill her right then. Maybe he hit her too hard. And then he had to cover it up." "The crash was the cover-up," Betty said. "They put her in the car. They staged it. Dr. Thorne signed the death certificate citing multiple injuries sustained in accident. He ignored the defensive wounds. He ignored the fact that her fingers were broken in a way that happens when you hold your hands up to protect your face, not when you grip a steering wheel." Tears were streaming down my face, hot and angry. "Why didn't anyone stop him?" I asked. "Why didn't you say something?" "I tried," Betty said. "I went to the hospital board. 2 days later. My pension was threatened. I was told I was imagining things, but I wasn't the only one." "Who else?" Nolan asked. "There was a security guard," Betty said. "Gus, Gordon Harlan. He was working the parking lot that night. He saw Calvin arrive. He saw things that didn't match the story. Gus was a good man. He wanted to go to the police." "What happened to him?" I asked. "He was fired a week later," Betty said. "For sleeping on the job?" Which was a lie. Gus never slept. He told me he was going to take his evidence and go upstate, to get away from Whitmore's reach. I haven't seen him in 10 years. Nolan pulled out his phone. "Gordon Harlan, upstate New York. I will put the team on it." "You need to go," the archivist said suddenly. My screen just flashed. Administrative login. "Dr. Thorne is accessing the physical request log. He knows someone is inquiring about the file." "Take this," Betty said, pushing the photocopy into my hand. "It's not an original. It won't hold up in court by itself, but it's the truth." "Thank you," I said. I wanted to hug her, but there was no time. "Go," she urged, "and bring that bastard down." We turned and ran. We sprinted back down the hallway, the sound of our footsteps echoing against the linoleum. We hit the elevator button, and the doors slid open immediately. As we ascended, I looked at the piece of paper in my hand. It was just a flimsy sheet, but it weighed more than the entire building. It was proof that my mother hadn't just left me. She had been taken from me. We burst out of the hospital doors into the cold night air. The Lincoln was waiting, engine running. Vivian saw us coming and threw the back door open. We piled in. "Go!" Nolan shouted to the driver. As the car pulled away, speeding into the safety of the city traffic, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a text message. Unknown number. No ID. I stared at the screen, the blue light illuminating the paper I was still clutching. "If you dig into your mother's past, you will end up like her." I looked out the rear window. The hospital was receding into the distance, a glowing monument to secrets. I gripped the phone until my knuckles turned white. "Is everything all right?" Vivian asked, watching me closely. I showed her the phone. Vivian read the text. Her expression didn't change, but her eyes went cold. "They are watching." "Good," I said. I surprised myself with the steadiness of my voice. "I want them to watch. I want them to see me coming." "Where to?" the driver asked from the front. Nolan looked up from his tablet. "I found him, Gordon Gus Harlan. He has a hunting cabin near Lake Placid. It's a 5-hour drive." "Drive," Vivian ordered. "We are not stopping until we find the man who saw the devil." I looked down at the text message one more time before deleting it. They thought fear would stop me. They didn't understand. I had lived in fear for 10 years. I was done with it. Now, it was their turn to be afraid. The interstate stretching toward upstate New York was a ribbon of charcoal cutting through a world of black pines and dirty snow. We had switched vehicles at a secure garage on the outskirts of Philadelphia. The Lincoln was too conspicuous, too much of a target. Now, we were in a heavy-duty SUV with reinforced glass, a vehicle that felt more like a tank than a car. Nolan was driving. He had shed his suit jacket, his sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms tense with concentration. Vivian sat in the back with me, her posture perfect, even at 4 a.m. She was reviewing digital maps on a tablet, the blue light making her silver hair look like spun glass. We were not alone. 2 cars behind us. A black sedan mirrored our every lane change. It had been there since we crossed the state line. "They are still there," I said, watching the headlights in the side mirror. They looked like the glowing eyes of a predator that refused to blink. "I know," Nolan said calmly. His eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. "They are maintaining a 4-car distance, professional spacing. They want us to know they are there." "Is it the police?" I asked. The fear was a cold stone in my stomach. "Did Calvin call them?" "No," Vivian answered, not looking up from her screen. "If it were the police, we would have seen lights and sirens 50 miles ago. This is private security. High-end, expensive." "Calvin," I whispered. "He is trying to rattle us," Nolan explained, his voice steady. "He knows we are heading to Gus Harlan's last known address. He can't stop us legally without a court order he doesn't have, so he is using intimidation. He wants you to panic. Audrey, he wants you to tell me to turn the car around." I looked at the headlights again. A few hours ago, I would have panicked. I would have folded. But the image of that photocopy from the hospital, the words defensive posturing, was burned into my retinas. "Keep driving," I said. "Don't stop." Nolan smiled grimly. "I wasn't planning on it." We drove for another 3 hours. The sun began to bleed into the sky, a pale, bruised purple that offered no warmth. The landscape changed from suburban sprawl to the rugged, desolate beauty of the Adirondacks. The trees grew taller, the houses fewer. By the time we reached the exit for the lake, the world was a silent expanse of white and gray. Gus Harlan lived off the grid. The GPS led us down a winding dirt road that was barely plowed, the tires crunching over packed ice. We lost the tail somewhere on the main highway, or so we thought. Nolan had pulled a sudden exit maneuver that left the black sedan stuck behind a semi-truck, but the feeling of being watched remained. We pulled up to a small, weathered cabin set back from the road. It looked abandoned. The windows were dark, and snow was piled high on the roof. But there were tire tracks in the driveway, fresh ones. "Stay in the car," Nolan commanded. He reached under his seat and pulled out something that looked like a heavy flashlight, but the way he held it suggested it was a weapon. The security detail, 2 men in a trailing SUV, who had joined us near Albany, stepped out first. They swept the perimeter, their breath puffing in the freezing air. One of them signaled to Nolan. "Clear," Nolan said, "but be careful." We stepped out. The air was biting, smelling of pine needles and wood smoke. We walked up the path to the porch. The front door was slightly ajar. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Someone was here," I whispered. A voice called out from the neighboring property, a small shack about 100 yards through the trees. "You folks, friends of Gus." We turned. An old man in a thick plaid jacket was leaning on a snow shovel, watching us suspiciously. "We are," Nolan said, stepping forward with his hands visible. "Is he home?" The neighbor spat into the snow. "Hard to say. He don't like visitors, but he had some earlier, around 6 a.m. 3 guys in suits, looked like government, but they drove a fancy car. Didn't stay long. Heard a lot of shouting, though." "Did they take him?" Vivian asked sharply. "Nope," the neighbor said. "Saw them leave alone. Gus is in there. Unless he took off into the woods. He does that sometimes." Nolan nodded his thanks and we moved to the door. He pushed it open with his foot. The inside of the cabin was a wreck. Drawers were pulled out, their contents spilled onto the floor. Books were swept off the shelves. The mattress in the corner had been slashed open, the stuffing erupting like white popcorn. They tossed the place, Nolan said. Looking for something. Gus, I called out. My voice trembled. Gus Harlan. Silence. Then, a creak from the floorboards above us. There was a loft. Go away, a voice shouted from the shadows of the rafters. It was hoarse, terrified. I told the other guys, I don't have it anymore. Leave me alone. We aren't with them, I shouted back, stepping into the middle of the room. My name is Audrey. I am Mara's daughter. The silence that followed was heavy. Slowly, a head peeked over the edge of the loft railing. A man with a wild gray beard and eyes that looked like they hadn't slept in a decade stared down at me. He was holding a tire iron. He squinted, looking at my face in the shaft of morning light coming through the broken door. Mara, he breathed. The tire iron lowered. I am Audrey, I repeated. You knew my mother. You were at the hospital the night she died. Gus Harlan scrambled down the ladder. He moved with the jerky, nervous energy of a squirrel. He landed on the floor and walked toward me, stopping 3 feet away. He smelled of stale tobacco and fear. You have her eyes, he said. God help you. You have her eyes. And her chin. He looked at Vivian, who was standing in the doorway. He stiffened. And you're the ghost. The grandmother. They said you were dead. They say a lot of things, Vivian said coolly. We need to know what you saw, Mr. Harlan, and we need to know what you have. Gus rubbed his face with dirty hands. I knew this day would come. I told myself it wouldn't, but I knew. That man Whitmore. He is the devil. The men who were here this morning, Nolan asked. What did they want? They wanted the drive, Gus said. They offered me $50,000. Then they threatened to burn the cabin down with me inside. I told them I lost it. I told them I threw it in the lake years ago. Did you? I asked. Gus looked at me. His eyes filled with tears. No, I couldn't. It was her voice. I couldn't throw her away. He walked over to a pot-bellied stove in the corner. It was cold. He reached inside the ash box, digging through the soot with his bare hands. He pulled out a small metal box, coated in black dust. He opened it. Inside, wrapped in a plastic bag, was a silver USB drive and a small digital voice recorder, the kind doctors used to use for dictation. I was doing my rounds, Gus whispered, clutching the box. I had this recorder on me to log license plates. I heard screaming in the parking lot before they even got inside. I turned it on. He looked at the recorder. It has the audio of the arrival, Gus said. And the USB, I stole that from the security office before they wiped the tapes. It has the video of the ambulance bay. You can see her. You can see she was trying to get away from him. Gus, Nolan said, his voice urgent. You have to give those to us. We can protect you. We can take you somewhere safe. Safe? Gus laughed, a high, hysterical sound. There is nowhere safe from Calvin Whitmore. He owns the judges. He owns the cops. Not anymore, Vivian said. We are going to break him, but we need that proof. Gus looked at me. He held the box out, his hand shaking. Do it for her, he said. She was a good woman. She didn't deserve to die like that. I reached out to take the box. My fingers brushed the cold metal. Crash. The world exploded into noise. A massive roar of an engine tore through the quiet morning. The front wall of the cabin splintered inward as the grill of a heavy-duty pickup truck smashed through the wood and glass. Debris flew everywhere. I was thrown backward, landing hard on the floor. Dust and snow swirled in a blinding cloud. Secure the target, Nolan screamed. I scrambled up, coughing. The truck had backed up, ripping half the porch away with it. Through the gaping hole in the wall, I saw men jumping out of the truck. They were wearing ski masks. Gus, I yelled. Gus was on the floor, dazed, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. The metal box was lying on the floorboards between us. I lunged for it. At the same time, a figure in black leapt through the broken wall. He was fast. He kicked the box away from my hand. It skittered across the floor, sliding toward the opening where the snow was swirling in. Get the girl, one of the masked men shouted. Nolan was there instantly. He tackled the man closest to me, driving him into the wall. Vivian's security detail was engaging the others outside, and I heard the distinct pop, pop, pop of non-lethal pepper ball rounds being fired. I crawled toward the box. It was inches from the edge of the shattered floorboards. Another man grabbed my ankle, dragging me back. I kicked him in the face, my heel connecting with his mask. He grunted and let go. I reached for the box again. My fingers touched the cool metal. Suddenly, a heavy boot slammed down on my hand. I screamed. The pain was blinding. The man stood over me. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the box. He reached down and snatched it up. "Got it," he yelled. "Retreat," the driver of the truck shouted. "No," I screamed, scrambling to my feet. "Stop him." The man with the box leaped off the edge of the broken porch, landing in the snow. He sprinted toward the truck. Nolan pushed past me, drawing a handgun, now a real one. He aimed at the fleeing man. "Don't shoot," Vivian shouted from the corner where she had taken cover. "If you shoot him in the back, we lose the moral high ground. We are not them." Nolan hesitated. In that second of hesitation, the man dove into the bed of the pickup truck. The truck spun its tires, spraying gravel and ice, and roared away down the driveway. Our security team fired at the tires, but the truck had run flats. It didn't stop. Silence rushed back into the clearing, broken only by the sound of the truck fading into the distance and the wind howling through the ruined cabin. I stood there, clutching my throbbing hand. The box was gone. The USB was gone. The recording was gone. Gus was sitting up in the debris, looking at the empty spot on the floor where his insurance policy had been. "They took it," he whispered. "They took the only thing that kept me alive." Nolan holstered his weapon. He looked furious. He walked over to the window, watching the dust settle. "They were waiting," he said. "They knew we would lead them right to it. The neighbor he tipped them off. He wasn't a neighbor. He was a spotter." I felt a wave of nausea. We had been played. "We have to go," Vivian said, stepping over a pile of shattered wood. She looked unshaken, though her face was pale. "The police will be here in 10 minutes, and this time, they won't be friendly. Calvin will spin this as a break-in gone wrong." "But we lost the evidence," I said, my voice cracking. "We have nothing." "We have Gus," Nolan said, helping the old man to his feet. "Gus, you heard the tape. You saw the video. You can testify." Gus looked at Nolan, then at the gaping hole in his house. "Testify. Without the tape, it is just the word of a crazy old hermit against a billionaire. They will destroy me." "We won't let them," I said. I grabbed Gus's arm with my good hand. "Get in the car. Please. We can't leave you here." We dragged Gus out to the SUV. As we piled in and sped away, leaving the ruined cabin behind, I looked down at my hand. It was swelling, turning a dark, angry purple. But the pain wasn't what bothered me. It was the text message I had received earlier. "If you dig into your mother's past, you will end up like her." They had the proof. They had the USB. But as I looked at Gus, trembling in the seat next to me, I realized something. They had made a mistake. They thought the USB was the weapon. They didn't realize that the weapon was the truth, and the truth was sitting right here, breathing and alive. "Where are we going?" Gus asked, his voice hollow. Vivian turned from the front seat. Her eyes were hard as diamonds. "We are going back to Philadelphia," she said, "but not to the office. We are going to find the one person who hates Calvin almost as much as we do." I looked at her, confused. "Who?" "Your brother," Vivian said. "Evan." I stared at her. Evan is a parasite. He is on their side." "Is he?" Vivian asked. She held up her phone. "Because while you were fighting for that box, I received an email from an encrypted address. It has a subject line, 'I know where the bodies are buried.'" I looked at the screen. The sender wasn't a name. It was a handle I recognized from Instagram. Golden Boy Evan. The car sped up, merging onto the highway. We had lost the battle in the woods, but the war was just getting started. The ride back to Philadelphia was a funeral procession for my hope. We had driven 5 hours to find the truth, only to have it snatched away by men in ski masks and a pickup truck. My hand was throbbing, wrapped in a makeshift ice pack, but the pain in my chest was far worse. We had Gus, which was a victory, but a witness without physical evidence was just an old man telling stories against a billionaire. We arrived at the Four Seasons in downtown Philadelphia just as the afternoon sky was turning the color of a bruised plum. Vivian had rented out the entire top-floor penthouse. It was a fortress of luxury, a place where the carpets were so thick they swallowed the sound of your footsteps. I walked into the main suite and collapsed onto a velvet sofa. I felt hollow. "We lost," I said, staring at the ceiling. "They have the drive. They have the recording. Calvin wins again." Vivian walked over to the minibar and poured a glass of sparkling water. She looked irritatingly calm. She didn't look like a woman who had just watched a cabin get demolished. She looked like a chess player who had just sacrificed a pawn to open up the queen. "We lost a battle, Audrey," she said, handing me the glass. "But the war is fluid, and sometimes the enemy delivers the ammunition to your doorstep." "What does that mean?" I snapped, sitting up. "We have nothing. Gus is terrified. The hospital records are being wiped, and Calvin is probably burning that USB drive right now." "Calvin is arrogant," Vivian said, "and arrogant men make mistakes. Specifically, they underestimate the people they use." She gestured toward the bedroom door of the suite. "You have a visitor." My stomach dropped. "Who, the police?" "No," Vivian said. "Someone who claims to have a conscience, though I suspect he just found a calculator and realized the math didn't add up." The bedroom door opened. I stood up, my fists clenching instinctively. It was Evan. My half-brother stood in the doorway. He looked nothing like the smug, phone-wielding influencer he had been on the porch the night before. He was wearing a hoodie with the hood pulled up, and his face was pale and sweaty. He looked like he hadn't slept in 2 days. He looked like a child. "Get him out of here," I hissed, stepping back. "Vivian, why is he here?" "He is one of them. He filmed me. He laughed while Dad threw my clothes in the trash." "Audrey, wait," Evan said. His voice cracked. He sounded terrified. "Wait for what?" I shouted. The anger I had been suppressing exploded. "So you can record this too. Is this for your TikTok? My sister's mental breakdown at the Four Seasons?" "I am not recording," Evan said. He pulled his hands out of his hoodie pocket. He was holding something. It wasn't a phone. It was a black USB drive. He walked over to the coffee table and placed it down. The click of the plastic against the glass table echoed in the silent room. "I stole this," Evan whispered, "from Dad's safe, while he was screaming at the lawyers this morning." I looked at the drive, then at him. "Why?" Evan sank into an armchair, putting his head in his hands. "Because I heard him talking to Marla about the shell companies." "What shell companies?" Nolan asked, stepping forward from the corner of the room where he had been debriefing the security team. Evan looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. "The ones he made me sign for. He told me they were for my future. He said he was setting up a portfolio for me so I could learn the business. He made me the sole signatory on 3 LLCs based in Panama." Nolan let out a low whistle. "Let me guess. Those LLCs are the ones holding the debt from the failed Cayman project." Evan nodded miserably. "I didn't know. I thought he was trusting me. But I heard him today. He told Marla that if the SEC comes looking, the paper trail ends with me. He said, 'Evan is a minor. He will get a slap on the wrist. I can't go to prison. Marla, the boy will take the fall.'" I stared at my brother. For years, I had envied him. I thought he was the prince of the castle. I thought he was loved. But now I realized the truth. To Calvin, I was trash to be thrown out. But Evan was just a human shield to be used. We were both just objects to him. "He was going to send you to prison," I said softly. "He didn't care," Evan said, tears spilling onto his cheeks. "He looked right at me this morning and smiled and told me he was proud of me, And then he went into the other room and planned how to ruin my life. Evan pointed at the USB drive on the table. That drive, it is his insurance policy. He keeps digital copies of everything, just in case he needs leverage against his partners, or against Mom. Mom. I froze. There are files on there, Evan said. From 10 years ago, emails between him and Dr. Thorne, and a voice file, from her phone. I looked at Vivian. She nodded for me to take it. My hand shook as I picked up the drive. Nolan took it from me gently and plugged it into his laptop. He connected the laptop to the room's speaker system. Here is the folder, Nolan said, labeled November 12th. There is an audio file. Play it, I whispered. The room went silent. Nolan clicked the mouse. At first, there was just static. Then, the sound of heavy breathing. It was wet. Ragged breathing. The sound of someone in pain. Then, a voice. It was weak, strained, but unmistakable. It was the voice that had sung me lullabies. It was the voice that had been silent for 10 years. Calvin, please, put the phone down. Then, Calvin's voice. Cold, detached. You are not thinking clearly. Mara, you are hysterical. The doctor says you need rest. I don't need rest. My mother's voice rasped. I need a lawyer. I know what you did with the accounts. I saw the statements. You are stealing from Audrey. You are stealing from my mother's legacy. It is our money, Mara. It is her money. Her voice rose, then broke into a coughing fit. I am changing the will. Calvin, tomorrow morning, I am calling the firm. You won't touch another cent. There was a pause in the recording, a chilling, heavy silence. Then, Calvin spoke again. His voice was different now, lower. You aren't calling anyone, Mara. You are sick. You are very, very sick. And accidents happen when people are sick. Don't come near me, she whimpered. Don't let him decide for me. Someone help. The recording ended with a sharp click. I sat there, frozen. The air had left my lungs. He killed her, I said. It wasn't a question anymore. It wasn't a suspicion. It was a fact. She wasn't in a coma. She wasn't brain dead. She was awake. She was fighting him. And he finished it. I looked at Gus, who was sitting in the corner. The old man was weeping silently, his face buried in a handkerchief. He nodded. That was her. That was the night. I saw him go into the room right after that, and 10 minutes later, the code blue alarm went off. We have him, Nolan said. His voice was hard as steel. This recording proves motive. It proves premeditation. And with the financial documents Evan provided, we can prove the fraud that drove the murder. So we go to the police, Evan said, wiping his face. Right now, we give this to Sheriff Miller. Sheriff Miller will lose it, Vivian said sharply, or he will accidentally demagnetize the drive, or he will call Calvin and give him a heads up so he can flee the country. Vivian is right, Nolan said. This is Philadelphia, but Calvin has reach. If we hand this over to a local precinct, it might disappear. We need the FBI, but the FBI takes time to mobilize. And Calvin is moving assets right now. By the time they get a warrant, his accounts will be empty and he will be in a country without an extradition treaty. So what do we do? I asked. I felt a cold, focused rage settling over me. I looked at the USB drive. It was a weapon. I finally had a weapon. We don't go to the police first, Vivian said. She walked over to the window and looked out at the skyline. We go to the shareholders. The shareholders, Evan asked. Tomorrow night, Vivian said, turning to face us, is the Drake Meridian Annual Gala. It is the biggest event of the year. Investors, board members, the press, everyone will be there. Calvin is going, Evan confirmed. He bought a new tuxedo. He is planning to announce that he has acquired full control of the trust. He has a forged document saying you signed over your rights before you left. Of course he does, I said. He thinks he is going to be crowned king, Vivian said. A small, dangerous smile played on her lips. He thinks he is walking into a coronation. He doesn't know he is walking into an execution. You want to play the tape at the gala? Nolan asked, raising an eyebrow. It is risky, if security stops us. We have security, Vivian said, and we have the rightful owner of the company. She looked at me. Audrey, that gala is not just a party, it is a business meeting, and as of midnight last night, you are the majority shareholder. He will have security too, Evan warned. He hired a private paramilitary group. They won't let you near the microphone. Then we will have to be smarter than them, I said. I stood up. The grief was still there, a heavy stone in my heart, but the anger was stronger. I looked at Evan. You have access to the AV booth. Evan hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, I was supposed to run the slideshow for his speech. He wanted me to put up pictures of him doing charity work. We are going to change the slideshow, I said. Nolan began typing furiously on his laptop. I can sync the audio to the video files from the hospital emails. We can build a timeline, a visual indictment. But he will try to stop you, Evan said, looking at me with genuine fear. Dad, when he gets cornered, he gets violent. You heard the tape. I heard it, I said. I walked over to my brother. I didn't hug him. We weren't there yet. But I put a hand on his shoulder. He hurt Mom because she was alone. He hurt me because I was a child. But tomorrow night, he is not facing a sick woman or a scared little girl. He is facing all of us. Vivian clapped her hands together once. Nolan, draft the affidavit for Evan. Evan, you are going to write down everything you know about the shell companies. Gus, get some rest. We need you strong for the cameras. She turned to me. And you, Audrey, she said, we need to get you a dress. If you are going to take back your empire, you are going to look like an empress when you do it. I don't care about the dress, I said. You should, Vivian corrected. Calvin expects you to be the girl in the grease-stained apron. He expects the victim. We are going to give him the CEO. I looked at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Calvin was probably practicing his speech, thinking he had won. He thought he had buried the past. He didn't know the past was coming for him, wearing a wire and holding a remote control. Let's go to New York, I said. The Four Seasons suite had ceased to be a place of rest. By sunrise, it had transformed into a war room. The velvet curtains were pulled back to let in the harsh light of a Philadelphia morning, illuminating a scene that looked less like a family reunion and more like a tactical command center. Vivian had summoned an army. They arrived in shifts, men and women in sharp suits carrying nondescript briefcases. There were 3 forensic accountants from a firm in Chicago, 2 constitutional lawyers who specialized in estate litigation, and a cybersecurity team that set up a server rack on the mahogany dining table, the cooling fans humming a low, aggressive drone. I sat in the corner, watching them dissect my life. My waitress apron was gone, replaced by a tailored blazer Vivian had ordered for me. I felt like an actor wearing a costume, but as I listened to them, I realized the role I was playing was the most important one of my life. We are not going to win this with emotion, Vivian announced, standing at the head of the room. She was drinking black coffee and looking at a whiteboard covered in timelines. Calvin is a narcissist. If we attack his character, he will play the victim. He will cry on camera. We need to attack his math. Nolan stood up, uncapping a red marker. He drew 3 thick arrows pointing to a circle labeled Calvin. We are building a 3-pronged assault, Nolan said, looking at me. Audrey, you need to understand this structure because you are the one who is going to deliver it. He tapped the first arrow. Arrow 1, inheritance fraud. We have the documents showing the illegal transfer of the Mara Drake Legacy Fund. We have the forged signatures. We have the time-stamped logs showing the money was moved 12 hours before you legally turned 18. He tapped the second arrow. Arrow 2, financial malfeasance. Thanks to the files Evan provided, we can prove that Calvin used the trust as collateral for high-risk loans in the Caymans. That is not just bad management. That is embezzlement. It is a federal crime. He moved to the third arrow. The room went quiet. Arrow 3, Nolan said softly. The cover-up, the medical interference, the falsified death certificate. The deletion of the hospital archives. This takes it from white-collar crime to capital offense territory. I looked at the board. It was clean. It was logical. It turned the horror of my mother's death into a series of prosecutable facts. It looks so simple on the board, I said. But he will fight back. He has the microphone. He is already using it, one of the media consultants said. She turned on the large television mounted on the wall. This aired 10 minutes ago on the morning news. I watched, my stomach twisting. Calvin was standing on the steps of our house in Cedar Hollow, the house he had kicked me out of. Marla was clinging to his arm, looking devastated. "We are heartbroken," Calvin was saying to the cameras, his voice thick with practiced grief. "My daughter, Audrey, she has struggled with mental health issues for years, substance abuse, delusions. We tried to get her help. Yesterday, she ran away with a group of dangerous individuals who are manipulating her to extort money from the family." Marla wiped a fake tear. "We just want her home. Audrey, if you are watching, please, we forgive you." I stared at the screen. He is saying I am on drugs. I have never touched a drug in my life. I couldn't afford them even if I wanted to. "He is trying to discredit the witness," the consultant said. "He wants the public to think that anything you say at the gala is the ranting of an unstable addict." "Let him talk," Vivian said coldly. She didn't even look at the TV. "Every lie he tells now is another nail in his coffin when we prove the truth. But we need to make sure your voice is steady. Audrey, stand up." I stood up. "Shoulders back," Vivian commanded. "You have spent 10 years making yourself small so you wouldn't be a target. Stop it. You are a Drake. You are a Whitmore. You are the owner of the ground he is standing on. Occupy your space." I pulled my shoulders back. I lifted my chin. "Good," she said. "Now, tell me why you are here. Not the sad version, the CEO version." "I am here to get justice," I said. "Too vague," Vivian snapped. "Try again." "I am here to take back my money." "Too greedy." "Try again." I took a deep breath. I thought about the cold porch. I thought about the USB drive. "I am here to enforce the terms of the trust and remove a fraudulent guardian." Vivian smiled. "Better. Keep that tone. No tears, no screaming. Just cold, hard facts." While I practiced my statement, Nolan was in the adjacent room with Evan. The door was open, and I could hear the interrogation. It wasn't friendly. "I need every shell company. Evan," Nolan was saying. "If you leave one out, and we find it later, your immunity deal is void, and you go to prison as an accomplice." "I told you everything." Evan's voice was high, bordering on panic. "The Panama accounts, the crypto wallets, it is all there." "What about the charity?" Nolan asked. "The Whitmore Family Foundation. I am looking at the ledger. It has received $2 million in donations this year, but it has zero charitable output, no grants, no scholarships. Where did the money go?" There was a silence. "Evan," Nolan warned. "It goes to Marla," Evan whispered. I walked to the doorway. "What?" Evan looked up, miserable. "The charity is awash. Dad moves the money from the business into the foundation to avoid taxes, and then the foundation pays consulting fees to a design firm owned by Marla's sister. Then they split it. Marla uses it for her shopping, for the jewelry, for the cars." "Marla is in on it," I asked. "I thought she was just oblivious." "She knows," Evan said. "She signs the checks. Look at the board of directors list." Nolan pulled up a document on his laptop. There it was. Treasurer Marla Whitmore. "She isn't a victim," Nolan said, typing furiously. "She is a co-conspirator. This is money laundering, plain and simple." "We can use this," the media consultant said, stepping up behind me. "We can leak this to the tabloids right now. Socialite steals from orphans. It would destroy her credibility before the gala even starts." Everyone looked at me. It was the easy play. It was the dirty play. "No," I said. Vivian raised an eyebrow. "Audrey, this is war. We use the weapons we have." "We use the truth," I said firmly. If we leak it to the tabloids, it looks like a smear campaign. It looks like exactly what Calvin is doing to me. We aren't going to whisper this in the gossip columns. We are going to announce it on the stage, with the bank statements on the screen behind us. I looked at Evan. We are going to take them down, but we are going to do it with the law, not with rumors. Vivian looked at me for a long moment. Then, she nodded. You really are your mother's daughter. She had that same stubborn ethical streak. Very well. We saved the Marla revelation for the grand finale. The rest of the day was a blur of preparation. I memorized the timeline of the fraud. I learned how to answer hostile questions from reporters without getting defensive. I learned that if I didn't know the answer, I should simply say, "The documents will speak for themselves." By 6 p.m, the atmosphere in the suite had shifted. The panic was gone, replaced by a tense, vibrating energy. We were ready. The timeline was solid. The evidence was irrefutable. We had the audio of the murder, the financial records of the theft, and the testimony of the son they had betrayed. Vivian walked over to me. She was holding a garment bag. "It is time to get ready for the trip to New York," she said. "But first, we need to deal with the logistics of your entry. Since you are not on the guest list, we are going in as a hostile shareholder block." "I am ready," I said, and I meant it. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a leaf blowing in the wind. I felt like the storm. I picked up my phone to check the time. I had a notification from my bank app, my personal one, the small account where I kept my tips from the diner. It wasn't much, maybe $800, but it was mine. The notification read, "Account suspended." I frowned. I tapped on it. A message popped up in red text, "Access denied due to identity verification failure." "That is weird," I muttered. "My bank app is locked." "Try your email," Nolan said sharply. Sensing something, I tried to log into my email. Password incorrect. I tried my social media. Account disabled. "Nolan," I said, panic rising in my throat. "I can't get into anything. My phone, it says, 'No service now.'" Nolan grabbed his laptop. His fingers flew across the keyboard. His face went pale. "They just filed a motion," Nolan said. "In the Pennsylvania State Court. An emergency injunction." "What kind of injunction?" Vivian demanded. "Calvin's lawyers filed a claim stating that Audrey Taylor is a missing person," Nolan said, reading from the screen. "And that the person claiming to be her you is an imposter engaging in identity theft. They have frozen your legal status. They have flagged your social security number. They are trying to erase me," I whispered. "Again." "It is worse than that," Nolan said. He looked up, his eyes grave. "If your identity is flagged as fraudulent, security at the gala won't just deny you entry. If you try to pass the checkpoint with fake ID, they will arrest you on sight." "He is blocking the door," I said. "He knows we are coming." Vivian walked over to the window, looking north toward New York. Her expression was terrifyingly calm. "He thinks he can stop us with paperwork," she said. "He thinks that if he takes away your name, you cease to exist." She turned back to me. "He is wrong. You don't need a driver's license to crash a party. Audrey, you just need an invitation." "I don't have one," I said. "No," Vivian agreed. "But I do. And on that invitation, it says I am allowed a +1. She smiled, and it was the smile of a wolf baring its teeth. "Pack your bags. We are going to New York, and if the police try to stop us, let them try to arrest a dead woman and her ghost." The morning sun that hit the windows of our penthouse suite in Philadelphia did not feel like the dawn of a new day. It felt like an interrogation lamp. The air in the room was stale, recycled, and thick with the smell of burnt coffee and printer ink. We were supposed to be leaving for New York in 3 hours, but the war room had ground to a sudden, terrifying halt. Nolan Pierce stood by the window, his phone pressed to his ear. His knuckles were white. He wasn't speaking. He was listening, and with every second of silence, the lines on his forehead deepened. He lowered the phone slowly and turned to face us. Vivian was reviewing her speech on a tablet. I was trying to eat a piece of dry toast that tasted like sawdust. Evan was asleep in the armchair, clutching a pillow like a life raft. He made a move, Nolan said. His voice was flat, the professional detachment barely covering the tension underneath. What kind of move? Vivian asked, not looking up. Did he drain the accounts? We expected that. The freeze orders are already in place. It is not financial, Nolan said. It is judicial. Calvin just filed an emergency motion in the Southern District of New York. He is seeking a temporary restraining order against you. Audrey, and a gag order. I dropped the toast. A gag order. He can stop me from speaking. He is citing irreparable harm to the Drake Meridian brand, Nolan explained, walking over to the whiteboard and aggressively erasing our carefully planned timeline. He claims that you are an unstable individual with a history of mental illness, and that you intend to use the gala to commit corporate defamation. He has submitted affidavits stating that you have threatened violence against the board. That is a lie, I shouted, the injustice burning in my throat. I never threatened anyone. He is the one who had men break into a cabin with a truck. It doesn't matter if it is a lie, Nolan said grimly. It only matters if a judge believes it for long enough to sign the paper. If the order is granted, and you step up to that microphone tonight, you will be in contempt of court. You will be arrested before you get 3 words out. Turn on the television, Vivian commanded. Her voice was icy calm. Nolan grabbed the remote. He flipped to a local Philadelphia news station. The screen filled with the image of Marla. She was sitting in a studio, wearing a soft pastel blouse that made her look maternal and fragile. Her eyes were red-rimmed. A lower third graphic read, "Mother's plea for troubled daughter." "We just want her to be safe," Marla was saying to the interviewer, her voice trembling perfectly. Audrey has always been spirited, but after her 18th birthday, she just snapped. She started talking about conspiracies. She thinks her grandmother came back from the dead. It is tragic. We believe she is being manipulated by people who want to hurt my husband's company. The interviewer leaned in sympathetically. And these accusations she is making about the family finances. Marla wiped a tear. Delusions, plain and simple. We have tried to get her into a facility. We have a bed waiting for her at St. Jude's. We just want our little girl back. I stared at the screen, feeling physically ill. She is good, I whispered. She is really, really good. She stole $2 million from a charity, and she is on TV crying about my mental health. She is shaping the battlefield, Vivian said. They are trying to win the court of public opinion, so that when they drag you off stage in handcuffs, the world will applaud them for saving you. There is more, Nolan said. He hesitated, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite place. It was pity mixed with anger. Calvin's filing didn't just include the defamation claim, it included a paternity motion. I froze. A what? Nolan opened his laptop and spun it around so I could see the screen. It was a digital copy of a legal filing. Attached to it was a laboratory report. Subject DNA paternity test results. Alleged father, Calvin Whitmore. Child, Audrey Taylor. Probability of paternity, 0%. The room seemed to tilt on its axis. I gripped the edge of the table. He is saying, I couldn't finish the sentence. He is claiming he is not your father, Nolan said softly. He states that your mother had an affair, that he discovered it recently, and that because you are not a biological Whitmore, you have no standing to challenge his guardianship or claim residency in the family home. He is trying to sever the legal link completely. I looked at the document. 0%. For a moment, I didn't feel anger. I felt a strange, hollow relief. The man who had locked me out, who had stolen my future, who had murdered my mother, he wasn't my blood. I wasn't made of him. But then the reality crashed back in. If I am not his daughter, I said, my voice shaking, then he uses that to invalidate the trust. He uses that to say he had no obligation to me. He spins this so that I am just a stranger he generously housed for 10 years. It is a nuclear option, Vivian said. She walked over to the laptop and peered at the screen. Calvin is desperate. He is throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. Is it true? I asked Vivian. Did Mom? Vivian looked at me, her blue eyes fierce. Your mother loved that man. God help her. She was faithful to a fault. This is a lie. Audrey, a dirty, desperate lie. Nolan, she snapped. Analyze the file. Nolan was already typing. I am running the metadata now. If this is a legitimate lab report, it will have a digital signature from the testing facility. The room was silent for a long minute, save for the clicking of keys and the sound of my own heart hammering against my ribs. Got you, Nolan whispered. What? I asked, leaning in. Look at the creation date of the PDF, Nolan said, pointing to a string of code. This document was created at 4 a.m. today, but look at the modification history. The base layer of this document, it is an old paternity test from an unrelated case file in the public records. He took a template, photoshopped his name and your name into the fields, and flattened the image. He pulled up another window. And here, Nolan pointed, the barcode at the bottom, I scanned it. It links back to a sample ID for a paternity test conducted in 2015, in Ohio, for a man named John Doe. It is a forgery, I breathed out. He faked a DNA test to disown me in court. He is sloppy, Nolan said, a savage grin appearing on his face. He rushed it. He didn't think we would have a forensic team looking at the metadata within 10 minutes of the filing. We can prove this is fraudulent, and filing false evidence in federal court. That is a felony. He just handed us another arrow. He doesn't care about the law anymore, a voice said from the armchair. We all turned. Evan was awake. He was sitting up, his face pale, his hair messy. He looked like a ghost haunting the hotel room. What do you mean, Evan? I asked. Evan rubbed his eyes. You guys keep trying to fight him like he is a businessman, like he is calculating risks. He isn't. He is scared. And when Dad is scared, he believes his own lies. Evan stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city that was waking up. I remember something he told me once, Evan said quietly. It was right after Mom died. I was 7. I asked him where she went. He looked at me, dead in the eye, and said, She went where quiet people go. Evan, a dead person stays silent. That is why they are the best kind of people. Evan turned to face Vivian. He thinks you are a ghost, Evan said. He really believes it. He thinks he killed the Drake family line 10 years ago, in his head. He is the king. He cannot process that you are real. He thinks if he just throws enough paper and enough lawyers at you, you will vanish back into the grave. Vivian stood very still. The morning light caught the sharp angles of her face. He is right about one thing, Vivian said softly. I did stay silent, for too long. She walked over to the table where the legal documents were spread out like a fan. Do you know why I let the world believe I was dead? Audrey, she asked me. To protect the fund, I guessed. To hide from the people who were trying to kill you. That was part of it, Vivian admitted. But there was a strategy, a specific clause in the Drake Charter that my father wrote 80 years ago. It is called the Resurrection Clause. That sounds dramatic, Nolan noted. It is, Vivian said. The clause states that if a primary trustee is declared dead, and that death is later proven to be falsified or connected to criminal fraud by a beneficiary in this case, Calvin then, upon the return of the trustee, the statute of limitations on all financial transactions is waived. My eyes widened. What does that mean in English? It means, Nolan realized, his eyes lighting up, that the moment Vivian steps onto that stage and proves she is alive, and proves that Calvin lied about her death, every single contract, loan, and transfer he signed in the last 10 years is instantly voidable. We don't have to sue him for each theft individually. The entire decade is annulled. He dug his own grave, Vivian said. He used my death as a shield. Now, it is the sword that will cut his head off. But we have to get you on that stage, I said. And we have to get me on that stage, if the restraining order holds. We are going to New York, Vivian said firmly. Nolan, draft a counter motion proving the DNA is forged. File it directly with the judge's clerk. We will beat the TRO before the gala doors open, but we need to move, now. The energy in the room shifted again. The despair of the morning evaporated, replaced by the adrenaline of the hunt. We packed the laptops. We shredded the draft papers. We were moving out. I went into the bedroom to grab my bag. My phone, which I had managed to reconnect to the hotel Wi-Fi since my service was cut, buzzed on the nightstand. I picked it up, expecting another update from the legal team. It wasn't. It was a text message from an unknown number. I opened it. An image loaded on the screen. My breath caught in my throat. It was a photo, a grainy, low-light photo taken from a low angle. It showed a hotel hallway. Specifically, the hallway right outside our suite door. I could see the number 4012 clearly on the brass plaque. The photo had been taken within the last 5 minutes. There was a room service tray in the corner of the frame that had just been delivered. Someone was right outside, below the photo. There was a single line of text, "Don't step on stage. Accidents run in the family." I dropped the phone on the bed. The threat wasn't legal anymore. It wasn't about restraining orders or DNA tests. Calvin knew he was losing the paper war. He knew his forgeries were sloppy. He knew his lies were crumbling. So he was going back to what worked. The same thing that happened to my mother. The same thing that happened to the cabin in the woods. I looked at the door of the bedroom. I could hear Vivian and Nolan in the other room, discussing logistics, talking about traffic routes to Manhattan. They were planning a legal battle, but out in the hallway, or in the lobby, or waiting in a car downstairs, there was a physical war waiting for us. I picked up the phone again. I didn't delete the message this time. I took a screenshot. I walked back into the living room. "We have a problem," I said, holding up the phone. Vivian looked at the photo. She didn't flinch. She just turned to the head of her security detail, a man named Marcus who had been a silent shadow in the corner. "Marcus," Vivian said, "we are compromised. Switch to Protocol Ghost." "Understood," Marcus said, tapping his earpiece. "I will bring the decoy car around the front." "Decoy?" I asked. "Calvin thinks he can scare us," Vivian said, putting on her coat. She looked at me, and for the first time, she smiled a genuine, warm smile. "He forgets that fear is a reaction, and we are done reacting. Now, we act." She opened the door to the suite. The hallway was empty. The room service tray was there, just like in the photo. "Let's go to New York," Vivian said, "and let's remind Calvin Whitmore that the dead don't stay silent forever." The glass atrium in Manhattan was not just a building. It was a cathedral dedicated to the worship of capital. The structure was a towering cube of sheer glass suspended over the city streets, glowing from within like a radioactive jewel. Inside, 500 of the wealthiest people on the East Coast were drinking champagne that cost more than my entire year's rent, waiting to hear how much richer they had become in the last quarter. We arrived in the secondary vehicle, a nondescript black sedan that slipped into the underground loading dock, while the decoy limousine, the one the paparazzi were swarming out front, drew all the fire. I stepped out of the car. The air in the loading dock smelled of exhaust and expensive perfume. I smoothed the fabric of my dress. It was a deep, midnight blue silk, structured and sharp. Vivian had chosen it. She said it was not a dress for a debutante. It was a dress for a coronation. Vivian stepped out beside me. She looked regal, terrifying, and utterly alive, but I saw her hand tremble as she adjusted her diamond brooch. It was the first crack I had seen in her armor since she appeared on my lawn. "Are you ready?" she asked. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were darting around the shadows of the concrete bay. "I am ready," I said. My heart was beating a rhythm against my ribs that felt like a war drum. Thump, thump, thump. We took the service elevator up. When the doors opened, the noise hit us first. A roar of conversation, clinking glass, and a string quartet playing something aggressive and fast. We stepped out onto the mezzanine level, looking down into the atrium. It was blinding. The flashbulbs from the press pit were popping like strobe lights. The room was a sea of black tuxedos and glittering gowns, and in the center of it all, standing on a raised platform near the stage, was Calvin. He looked impeccable. He was wearing a custom tuxedo, holding a crystal tumbler, laughing at something a senator was whispering in his ear. He looked like the man who owned the world. "He looks happy," I whispered. "He looks relieved," Vivian corrected. "He thinks the restraining order worked. He thinks we are stuck in a hotel room in Philadelphia, crying into our pillows." We began to walk down the grand staircase. It took a moment for the room to notice. First, a few heads turned, then a hush rippled through the crowd. Spreading outward from the staircase like a wave, the string quartet faltered, then stopped. Vivian Drake, the woman who had been dead for 10 years, was walking down the stairs. The silence was absolute. It was heavy and thick. I could hear the click of my own heels on the marble steps. Calvin turned. The color did not just drain from his face, it vanished. He looked like a wax figure that had been left too close to a fire. He dropped his glass. It shattered on the floor, the sound exploding like a gunshot in the quiet room. We reached the bottom of the stairs. Security guards started to move toward us, unsure of what to do. They looked at Calvin for orders. Calvin recovered faster than I expected. He was a survivor, a cockroach in a tuxedo. He forced a smile onto his face, a rictus of terror and charm, and walked toward us, his arms open wide. "Audrey," he boomed, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. And my God, it can't be. He stopped 3 feet away from us. He didn't hug us. He blocked us. His body was a wall between us and the stage. "Vivian," Calvin said, his voice dropping to a theatrical whisper that the nearby guests could hear. "We thought we buried you. This is a miracle." Then he leaned in close. The smile stayed on his face, but his eyes were dead sharks. "You have made a mistake coming here," he hissed, so only I could hear. "The police are on their way. You are violating a federal order." "The order was vacated," I said. I looked him right in the eye. I didn't blink. "Nolan filed the counter motion an hour ago. The judge didn't like your forged DNA test. Dad?" Calvin's eye twitched. "You think you are clever," he whispered. "You think because you found an old woman and put her in a dress, you can take this company. You don't know what she did. Audrey, you don't know why she had to die." "I know enough," I said. "She is a monster." Calvin spat, his breath smelling of scotch and mints. "She left your mother to rot, and now she is using you. Get out while you can." "I am not going anywhere," I said, "and neither are you." "Ladies and gentlemen," Calvin shouted, spinning around to face the room. "Please give us a moment. It seems we have a family reunion that needs a private room." He signaled to the head of his security team. "Escort them to the green room, now." "We are not going to the green room," Vivian said, her voice cut through the air, sharp and clear. "We are going to the stage." "You are not on the program," Calvin snarled. "I am the chairman of the board," Vivian said. "I am the program." We pushed past him. The crowd parted for us, a mixture of shock and awe on their faces. We were halfway to the stage entrance when the next obstacle hit. Evan and Nolan were behind us, or they were supposed to be. I turned around. At the security checkpoint leading to the backstage area, 2 large guards were blocking the path. Evan was standing there, looking small and panicked. "I am sorry, sir," the guard was saying loudly. "Your name has been removed from the clearance list. Strict orders, no access." Calvin had anticipated this. He couldn't stop Vivian and me from entering the building, but he could stop the witness from getting to the microphone. I stopped. "We need him," I said to Vivian. "He has the flash drive. He has the speech." Nolan stepped forward. He didn't look like a lawyer anymore. He looked like a street fighter in a suit. He pulled a badge out of his pocket, not a law firm badge, but a corporate lanyard. "Check the list again," Nolan said, "under external audit oversight." The guard frowned. "I don't have an Evan Whitmore on the oversight list." "He isn't listed as Evan Whitmore," Nolan said smoothly. "He is listed as the custodial holder of evidence for the Pierce Legal Group. which is currently conducting a live compliance audit of this event. If you deny him entry, you are obstructing a federal audit. Do you want to be personally named in the lawsuit tomorrow morning?" The guard hesitated. He looked at Calvin, who was busy trying to calm down a group of investors near the bar. He looked at Nolan's intense face. "Fine," the guard grunted. "Go, but stay off the main floor." Evan scrambled through the checkpoint, clutching his laptop bag like a shield. Nolan followed, giving me a quick nod. "We are in." We reached the backstage area. It was dark, a stark contrast to the blinding light of the atrium. Cables snaked across the floor like black vipers. Stagehands were running back and forth with headsets. Vivian stopped. She leaned against a flight case, her hand going to her chest. Her breath was coming in short, shallow gasps. "Grandmother?" I asked, reaching out to her. She looked at me. Her face was pale. The Iron Lady was melting. "I can't," she whispered. "Audrey, I can't go out there. 10 years, I have been a ghost for 10 years. Out there they will tear me apart. They will ask questions I cannot answer." "You don't have to answer them," I said. "You just have to stand there." "I am old," she said, a tear leaking from her eye. "And I am tired. Calvin is right. I did leave Mara. I ran away to save myself. I am a coward." I looked at the curtain. On the other side, the host was tapping the microphone. The show was starting. I grabbed Vivian's hands. They were cold. "You are not a coward," I said fiercely. "You survived, and because you survived, I am here. But you are right. You can't fight him alone. You don't have to." I let go of her hands and straightened my blazer. "I will do it," I said. Vivian looked up. You are 18. You have never spoken to a crowd larger than a dinner shift." "I am not 18 anymore," I said. "I aged 10 years in the last 24 hours, and I'm not going to be like Mom. I am not going to let him silence me in a bedroom or a hospital or a stage. I am going to scream." "Ladies and gentlemen," the voice of the host boomed over the speakers, "please take your seats. The presentation is about to begin." I looked at Nolan. "Is the feed ready?" Nolan opened his laptop, which was connected to the main AV board. "It is synced. As soon as you give the signal, I cut Calvin's slide deck and run ours." "What is the signal?" Evan asked, his voice trembling. "When I say the word legacy," I said. The host continued. "To open tonight's festivities. We were expecting our CEO, Calvin Whitmore, but it seems we have a surprise addition to the agenda, a representative of the founding family." Calvin must have gotten to the host. The introduction was dismissive, almost mocking. "Please welcome Miss Audrey Taylor." There was polite, confused applause. I walked toward the opening in the curtain. Calvin was standing there. He was in the wings, hidden from the audience but visible to me. He was holding a handheld microphone. His face was a mask of pure hatred. "Don't do it," he mouthed. "I will ruin you. I will release the medical files. I will tell them you are insane." He raised the microphone. He was going to override me. He was going to talk over me, interrupt me, drown me out. He was going to turn my speech into a debate, and then into a joke. I didn't stop. I walked past him. I walked out into the light. The glare was physical. It hit me like a wave of heat. I squinted, trying to see the faces in the crowd. 500 people, 500 strangers who thought I was a girl with a drug problem. I walked to the podium. The microphone was silver and cold. I looked out at the room. I saw Marla in the front row, looking pale. I saw the board members whispering. I took a breath. "My name is Audrey Taylor," I said. My voice didn't shake. It boomed through the speakers, clear and strong. "And for 10 years, I have been living in a house with a lock that I didn't own." Calvin stepped out from the wings. He raised his microphone. "Audrey is not well," Calvin shouted, his voice booming over the PA system, clashing with mine. "Cut the mic. Security." The crowd gasped. It was happening. He was silencing me. "She is having an episode," Calvin yelled, walking toward me on stage. "I apologize. Everyone. My daughter is very sick." I didn't back down. I looked at Nolan in the wings. Now, I screamed. Legacy. Nolan hit the enter key. The massive LED screen behind me, which had been displaying the Golden Drake Meridian logo, flickered. It went black for a second. Then, a file opened. It wasn't the slideshow of financial crimes we had prepared. It wasn't the timeline of the fraud. It was a video file. But it wasn't the one Evan gave us. I turned around. Confusion hitting me. The screen filled with a grainy, black and white security footage time-stamped from 10 years ago. It showed a hospital hallway. But it wasn't the hallway I expected. It wasn't the trauma unit. It was the maternity ward. And in the video, a man was handing a baby to a nurse. The man was Calvin, but the nurse was handing him a thick envelope of cash. And then, a document flashed on the screen. A birth certificate. Name Audrey Doe. Place of birth State Ward 4. Mother unknown. Father unknown. The entire room went dead silent. I froze. My blood turned to ice. This wasn't part of our presentation. This wasn't on Evan's drive. I looked at Calvin. He had stopped walking. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the screen. And for the first time, he looked genuinely confused. I didn't put that there, Calvin whispered. I looked at the wings. Nolan was frantically typing. I am locked out, he shouted. Someone else has control of the board. This isn't our file. The file on the screen zoomed in. A text overlay appeared, typing itself out in real time, letter by letter. Giant white letters against the black background. Audrey Taylor is not a Whitmore, but she is not a Drake either. I felt the floor sway beneath me. Who are you? The screen typed. The cliffhanger wasn't that I was about to expose Calvin. The cliffhanger was that someone else, someone watching, someone invisible had just exposed me. I looked out at the sea of faces. They weren't looking at the evidence of murder. They were looking at a girl who had just found out she didn't exist. Nolan, I screamed. Cut the feed. I can't, Nolan yelled back. It is hardwired. The screen flashed one last image, a photo of a woman I had never seen before. A woman with my face, but rougher, tired, wearing a prisoner's uniform, and then the screen went black. The silence in the glass atrium was broken by a single, slow clap. I turned. Calvin was smiling, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who realizes that while his house is burning down, his enemy just caught fire too. Well, Calvin said into his microphone, it seems we have a mystery guest. The silence in the glass atrium was heavier than the steel beams holding up the ceiling. The screen behind me had just declared me a fraud, a ghost, a nobody born in a state ward. Calvin was smiling that shark-like smile, waiting for me to crumble. He expected the girl who sat on the curb to run off the stage crying. He expected the waitress to apologize for spilling the drink, but I wasn't that girl anymore. I looked at the black screen. Then I looked at the 500 faces staring at me with a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. I looked at Vivian, who was standing in the wings, pale but standing tall. And then I looked at Calvin. I reached into my pocket. I didn't pull out a phone or a document. I pulled out the only thing I had carried with me since yesterday, the brass key, the one that hadn't turned. I placed it on the podium. The metal clicked against the wood. A tiny sound that somehow echoed through the microphone. I grabbed the neck of the microphone and ripped it off the stand. I ignored the prepared speech. I ignored the teleprompter. That screen says I don't exist, I said. My voice was low, but it vibrated with a rage so cold it burned. It says I am a mistake, a question mark. But this key is real. I held it up. Yesterday was my 18th birthday. I told the room. I didn't want a party. I didn't want a car. I just wanted to go home after a double shift on my feet. But when I put this key in the lock of the house my mother bought, it didn't turn. Calvin took a step forward. She is rambling security. Get her off. He changed the locks, I continued, my voice rising over his. He put my clothes in trash bags on the curb. He sat in the warm light and laughed while I froze. He told me I was no longer a liability he had to pay for. He didn't kick me out because I'm not his daughter. He kicked me out because he knew that at midnight, I became the owner of everything he stole. Lies. Calvin screamed. He was losing his composure now. The charm was cracking. She is a drug addict. Look at her eyes. Nolan, I shouted without looking back. Drop the hammer. Nolan Pierce, standing in the shadows of the AV booth, didn't hesitate. He had bypassed the external hack. He hit the enter key on the master override. The screen behind me exploded into light. The fake birth certificate vanished. In its place, a timeline appeared. It was massive, red and black, stretching across 20 feet of LED display. November 12th. 10 years ago. You want to talk about identity? I asked the room. Let's talk about the identity of the man who signed this. A document zoomed in. It was the transfer order for the Mara Drake Legacy Fund. $40 million, I said, pointing at the screen. Transferred 3 hours before my mother was pronounced dead. Signed by Calvin Whitmore. A collective gasp rippled through the room. The investors knew math. They knew that you couldn't transfer a dead woman's assets before she was legally dead unless you knew she wasn't coming back. And here, I said as the image shifted, the sealed order on her medical files. Why would a grieving husband seal the records of a car accident unless the injuries didn't match the crash? This is fabricated, Calvin yelled. He was sweating now, running onto the stage. This is a digital deepfake. I will sue every one of you. You say I am manipulated. I turned to face him. He was 10 feet away, his face twisted in fear. You say I am a puppet. Then tell me, Dad, whose voice is this? I nodded to Evan, who was standing by the soundboard with tears running down his face. Evan hit play. The audio system of the glass atrium was state-of-the-art. It was designed to make a violin sound like it was weeping in your ear, so when the recording played, it sounded like my mother was in the room with us. Calvin, please, put the phone down. The room froze. A woman in the front row covered her mouth. I don't need rest, my mother's voice echoed, weak and terrified. I need a lawyer. You are stealing from Audrey. Don't let him decide for me. Someone help. Then, the click of the phone being hung up, and then, a new voice. A voice everyone in the room recognized because he was sitting at table 4. Dr. Aris Thorne. She is becoming a problem. Calvin, the sedative isn't working. If she makes that call, we are both finished. And then Calvin's voice, cold as the grave. Then make sure she doesn't make the call. Finish it, Aris. I will handle the certificate. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I had ever heard. It was the sound of a reputation dying instantly. Calvin stood center stage, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on a dock. He looked at Dr. Thorne in the audience. Thorne was already standing up, trying to push his way toward the exit, but security was blocking the doors. That is out of context, Calvin stammered. That was a medical discussion. She was delirious. Ladies and gentlemen, a deep voice cut through the chaos. Arthur Sterling, the lead attorney for the Drake Meridian Group, walked onto the stage. He wasn't part of our initial plan, but he had been listening. He was followed by 2 men in dark windbreakers with gold badges on their belts. I have just received a communication from the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office, Sterling announced. Based on the digital evidence provided by a whistleblower inside St. Bridget Medical Center an hour ago, and the audio recording you just heard, an arrest warrant has been issued. No, Calvin screamed. He backed away, bumping into the podium. You can't do this. I am the CEO. I built this company. He looked around wildly, his eyes landing on me. The hatred in his face was pure and unfiltered. He reached into his jacket pocket. For a second, the security team tensed, thinking he had a gun, but he pulled out a folded piece of paper, the fake DNA test, the one from the screen hack. She isn't a Whitmore, Calvin shrieked, waving the paper like a flag of surrender. Read the test. I am not her father. She has no standing. She is a bastard child I took in out of charity. You can't give her the company. It was his last card, the final twist of the knife. He was willing to destroy my lineage to save his bank account. Nolan stepped out from the wings. He looked bored. He held up a tablet connected to the big screen. We anticipated this, Nolan said into his own mic. If you look at the screen, you will see the metadata of the file Mr. Whitmore is holding. The screen changed again. It showed the code behind the PDF. The document was created at 4 o'clock this morning, Nolan narrated, using a template downloaded from a legal forms website. The barcode at the bottom, it belongs to a paternity test from Ohio in 2015. The subject was a man named John Doe. Nolan looked at Calvin with disgust. You didn't just forge a bank transfer. Calvin, you forged a human being's identity. Audrey is your daughter. You just wished she wasn't, because it makes it harder to steal from her. Calvin crumpled. The paper slipped from his hand and drifted to the floor. He looked small. The tuxedo didn't fit him anymore. I did what I had to do, he whispered, looking at the floor. I saved this family. Mara was weak. She didn't understand business. And you don't understand justice, a voice said from the shadows. Vivian Drake stepped onto the stage. She didn't look like a ghost anymore. She looked like a queen returning from exile. She walked past Calvin as if he were a piece of furniture and stood next to me at the podium. She placed her hand on my shoulder. It was warm. For 10 years, Vivian said to the hushed crowd, I let you believe I was dead. I did it because I was afraid. I did it because I knew that as long as I was alive, he would hunt me. But in my absence, I left a fail-safe. She turned to Sterling, the lawyer. Read the resurrection clause, she commanded. Sterling opened his leather folio. Clause 99 of the Drake Trust Charter. In the event that a primary trustee is declared dead, and said death is later proven to be the result of fraud or criminal negligence by a beneficiary, all executive powers granted during the period of absence are retroactively annulled. Sterling looked up at Calvin. It means that every contract you signed, every board member you appointed, and every dollar you moved in the last 10 years is void. You are not the CEO. Mr. Whitmore, you never were. You were just a trespasser. Get him out of my sight, Vivian said. The federal agents moved in. They didn't put him in cuffs gently. They spun him around, pulling his arms behind his back. Calvin didn't fight. He just stared at me. I changed the locks, he muttered, his mind seemingly breaking under the pressure. I changed the locks so you couldn't come back. Take him, the agent said, as they dragged him off the stage, past the rows of shocked investors, past Marla, who was sobbing into her hands, while a separate team of officers read her rights regarding the charity fraud. The room burst into chaos. Reporters were shouting questions. Cameras were flashing. I stood there, feeling the adrenaline drain out of me, leaving my knees weak. I leaned against the podium. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It wasn't a text message this time. It was a call. I looked at the ID. Cedar Hollow Police Department. I answered it, putting it on speaker so Vivian could hear. Miss Taylor. It was Sheriff Miller. His voice sounded different. He sounded humble, scared. I am here, Sheriff, I said. I just wanted to let you know, Miller stammered. We saw the news, the broadcast. We went over to the house on Oak Creek Lane. We executed the writ of possession. And, I asked, the locksmith just finished. Miller said, the old locks are gone. We put in new ones, high security, and I have the keys right here in my hand. They are tagged with your name. Nobody gets in unless you say so. I looked at Vivian. She squeezed my shoulder. I looked at Evan and Nolan, who were high-fiving in the wings. Thank you. Sheriff, I said. You can leave the keys under the mat. I will be home soon. I hung up the phone. I picked up the brass key I had placed on the podium, the useless key that had started it all. I looked at it one last time, then I tossed it into the crowd. It is over, I whispered. Vivian took the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, the gala is canceled, but the board meeting starts tomorrow at 9 sharp. Good night. We walked off the stage together, leaving the wreckage of Calvin's empire behind us. We walked out of the glass atrium and into the cool New York night. The air smelled of rain and exhaust, but to me, it smelled like freedom. I took a deep breath. filling my lungs with the first clean air I had breathed in 10 years. "So," Vivian said, looking at me as the limo pulled up, "what now? CEO?" I smiled. It was a real smile this time. "Now," I said, "I am going to go home, and I am going to open my own front door." Thank you so much for listening to Audrey's story of justice and reclamation. I'd love to know where you are tuning in from right now. Are you listening on your way to work, at the gym, or relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments below so we can connect. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Maya Revenge Stories, hit that like button, and smash the hype button to help this story reach even more people. Your support means the world to us.